Hello everyone, Miss Meek here, and today we are going to talk about angle relationships. The next several videos that I will be posting is going to be about geometry, so angles and triangles, and how to make triangles, and how to use triangles to find missing things, and we're also going to talk about area of different shapes and volume of different shapes. And so the next several videos we're going to be entering in our geometry unit, so this is the first of many geometry videos coming your way. So we're going to talk about the different types of angles that there are, and then how can we use them to find missing angles. So first of all, let's talk about adjacent angles. Now, adjacent angles are next door neighbors. They are next door neighbors. And what's really cool about that is that they share, this is called a vertex, so they share a vertex. That's that pointy thing there. And they also share a side. So this side right here is the side that they shared. So shared vertex and shared side. That's what makes them be adjacent angles, is that they are like next door neighbors. They live right next to each other, kind of like apartments. If you've ever lived in an apartment, when you live in an apartment, you share a wall with the person that you live next to, and that is what's happening with these two angles. Now, unfortunately, with adjacent angles, there's not enough information here to be able for me to tell what A is and what B is, so I can't use the fact that they're adjacent angles to solve for these missing angles, but I can identify them as adjacent angles because that does matter in other contexts and geometry. Our next type of angle is vertical angles. Vertical angles are formed usually by x's or by intersecting lines. As you can see here, I have one line right here intersecting another line right here, and it forms these four angles in the middle: angle A, B, C, and D. What's really cool about these are kind of like they live across the street. So these angles that live across the street from each other, there's something special about them. They're actually equal. To show that they're equal, we draw a little semicircle in that angle. So angle A here is the same measurement as angle C. So that's something important to recognize here, that angle A is equal to angle C. And actually in geometry, we use the word congruent to represent equal. So algebra, the word for equal is equal or equivalent. In geometry, which is a different system of math, they use the word congruent. So angle A is actually congruent to angle C. Now what's really cool also about this is that that also means that angle B here is congruent to angle D. And so the way that I show that is by putting two little semicircles there to show that angle B is also equal to angle D. And this right here, in case you were wondering why I was putting less than symbols in front of my letters, that is not a less than symbol. Again, that's a this is the symbolic way to represent an angle without writing the word angle. Okay, so you use a little symbol like that to represent the word angle without having to write it out. And so what's really cool is if I know what A is, so say A is, I don't know, 70 degrees, I also now know what C is because A and C are the same, so C is 70 degrees. And if they tell me what B is, so say they say B is 110 degrees, well, I also know that D is 110. And so I can actually use the information to find missing pieces of angles. And so that's really, really helpful to know that about vertical angles, and that their across the street neighbor is equal to them or congruent to them, because you can use that to actually figure out all four angles eventually with some other information. Our other type of angle, this one's really important, it's called a supplementary angle. Supplementary or supplementary or supplementary angle. What this is it says that you have two angles on a straight line. So you can see that straight line right here. So this is your straight line. And that's really important because when you have two angles on a straight line, those two angles or those three angles, however many angles you have on that straight line, together those angles are going to equal 180 degrees. That is what supplementary means. So what they're essentially saying is that angle A plus that angle B there is going to equal 180 degrees. This is really helpful to know because say I knew that angle A was 110, and I know together those two angles are supposed to equal 180, I could solve for that missing angle. I would just solve it like one of our equations. I would take that 110 and I would subtract it from both sides. And when I do that, these go away and I'm left with angle B equals 70. So I could solve for that missing angle if I know one of them and I know that these are supplementary. And the biggest giveaway is that those angles are located on a straight line. So those two angles, as you can see, are located on this straight line right here. And that is how I know that they together equal 180 degrees. And I can use that information to find a missing angle if I needed to. On the opposite side, we have complementary angles. Complementary angles are equal to 90 degrees. So they usually form within right angles. This little box that I just drew here in the corner, this lets you know that you have a right angle. And right angles, guess what? They equal 90 degrees. So what that is telling me is that these two angles together, they have to equal 90 degrees. So angle A plus angle B has to equal 90 degrees. Again, this comes in handy because if they tell me that angle A here is 30 degrees, I could plug that in and then I could figure out what angle B is because I would subtract 30 from both sides, and that would tell me angle B is 60. So I could find that missing degree if I know, hey, these two angles together equal 90. One way to remember the difference between supplementary or supplementary and complementary or complementary is the letters they start with. So complementary starts with a C. If I connect my C together like so and add a 0, there's your 90 degrees. And then with supplementary, it starts with an S. If I connect my S together like so, I get an 8 for 180 degrees. So it's kind of a little trick to help you remember the difference between the two. One thing that we do have to mention for other types of angles is we have to talk about what a straight angle is. It's not anything super crazy. A straight angle literally is a straight line. So here I have a straight line drawn. And as we talked about here a minute ago, that on a straight line, from one point on the straight line to another point on the straight line equals 180 degrees. So if you have angles on a straight line, those angles are going to add up to 180 degrees because that is the measurement of a straight line from one point to the other. So that's something to notice that if you have a straight line, hey, I'm going to have some angles that are going to add up to 180 degrees. The other type of terminology we need to know is congruent angles. Congruent angles are angles that are equal to each other. Again, in geometry, we don't really say equivalent. We don't really say equal. We say congruent. And the symbol for congruent is an equal sign with a little wiggly line above it. This symbol right here means congruent. And so when you have congruent angles, what they're telling you is that, hey, if this angle is 45 degrees and it says that these two angles are congruent, that means that angle B is also 45 degrees. They're going to equal the same thing. So that's what congruent angles mean. So if you see them using that terminology, that's what they're referring to. So let's practice some of these types of problems where we would use this information. So what they want us to do is name what type of angle that we're talking about. So that's going to be adjacent, vertical, supplementary, complementary. Name the type of angle we're talking about and then find the missing angle. So on number 1 here, I see that we have two intersecting lines. There's a very specific type of angle that is formed by two intersecting lines, and that is called a vertical angle. A vertical angle. So number 1 identifies as a vertical angle, and it tells me that this angle right here is 60. Now remember, with a vertical angle, it's across the street neighbor is the same measurement as as itself, so they're congruent. So if this angle up here is 60, that means this angle down here is going to be 60 as well. So x is going to equal 60 degrees. That is the missing angle. Remember, vertical angles are congruent. They are equal to each other. Their across the street angles are equal to each other. Number 2, I see this little box right here. And just as a reminder, that little box is telling us that we have a right angle, and right angles equal 90 degrees. In terms of the angles that we just talked about today, complementary angles have to equal 90 degrees. So complementary angle is this type of angle. And because I know that these two angles together have to equal 90 degrees, I can actually set up an equation and figure out what x is going to be here. All I have to do is subtract 53 from both sides of my equation. Those are going to go away and leave me x. And let's see, 90 minus 53. I have to borrow. And I get x is going to equal 37. So this angle right here is 37 degrees. So I can find that missing angle right there, 37 degrees. And then lastly, number 3, I see something super important. I see a straight line right here. And I see that there are 2 angles located on the straight line. Now remember that when you have a straight line like I have here, those angles are going to be equal to 180 degrees. So these angles together equal 180 degrees. In terms of what type of angle this is, this would be a supplementary angle. Now, there's actually another type of angle as well. Both number 2 and number 3 are also another type of angle. Did anyone catch that? Yeah, number 2 is also adjacent. So we could label this as adjacent because those angles share a vertex right here and a wall. And this one right here is also adjacent. We could label it as a adjacent as well. Number 3 here, because again, they share a vertex right there and that wall right here. But we can, so some of these can be labeled as more than one thing, and that's totally fine. So let's go ahead and find this missing angle here in number 3. So I know that 130 and this x together is supposed to equal 180 degrees. That's what supplementary means. So I'm going to subtract 130 from both sides of my equation, and that's going to leave me with x equals 50. So I know that this missing angle over here is 50 degrees. And so I can use that information to find that missing piece of that missing angle. All right, guys, I hope that this helped explain the 5 or 6 different types of angles that we're going to be talking about here in this lesson, and how you can use them to actually find missing angles in different situations. All right, I will talk to you later. Bye.